Warning, watching this video may be highly educational. Alright, welcome back. Looks like we have some new followers. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to have some more demonstrations on how Hollywood makes things look cinematic, and due to popular demand, I have created for your educational pleasure a downloadable PDF comparing the different gels and what the spread patterns are like, the brightness levels, and the shadows. I'll put the link down below. But first of all, I want to settle once and for all, for those of you who think the most important thing to taking great pictures and video and movie making and cinematic is the camera and the lens, I'm going to settle this once and for all. Let's turn the lights out. Okay, this is one of the most beautiful objects in the world, inside of one of the most beautiful places in the world. All right, camera and lens, do your magic. I don't see anything. But I'm using a Canon C1000 cinema camera. How come I don't see anything? Let's turn up the ISO. That's even worse. All right, let's bring in the Area Alexa. There. Still don't see anything. How come? Yes, you in the back of the class?
You need light.
That's right, there's no light. Okay, let's turn on a light. There. All right, camera and lens, do your magic. Why does the image still suck? All right, let's bring in a red camera. Surely that will make it look great. All right, red camera, do your thing. Still not great. All right, let's bring in the IMAX camera. Let's go all the way. All right, IMAX camera, make this look cinematic. Oh, okay, let's change the placement of the light. There, okay, yeah, it's a little better. But it still doesn't look cinematic. Let's change the lens.
The lighting sucks.
Oh, good lighting is important, huh? All right, let's bring in some more lights. Yes. Now, I know most people think in order to take great pictures in movies, the camera and the lens are the most important things. I'm sorry, without light, the camera and the lens are worthless. Now, if you ask most people what the most basic factors of photography are, it would be focus. Is it in focus? How much of it is in focus? That's depth of field and the all-important blurry background. Exposure, right? Is it too light? Is it too dark? And what's the white balance? That's the color. Well, that all starts with the lens, right? So what is a lens? A lens is a tube with a bunch of pieces of glass in it, and the more you turn it, that makes the pieces of glass go in and out. So that makes a difference in how far this one goes in and out, how far this one goes in and out, and the distance from the light. So all of these make a difference of what the lens does. Now, the aperture, which is the hole, controls how much light physically goes into the camera. The bigger the hole, the more light obviously goes into the camera, the brighter the image. The smaller the hole, the sharper everything is, the more things are in focus. So you can get the same effect by squinting. If you want to see things more in focus, like in the distance, squint your eyes. The same thing with the camera. The smaller the hole, the more things are in focus, but you get less light. What it's actually doing, if you think about it, is it's controlling the size of the light source going into the camera. Now, this is important. Here we have 3 different lights of the same size and same power. And if you have 3 different size modifiers, small, medium, and large, with the same amount of light going into each one, you'll notice the smallest one's the brightest and the biggest one's the dimmest, obviously, because this is more concentrated light, and this light is spread out more over a bigger surface area. Now, if the smallest light creates the hardest shadows because it's a small size light. This one with the biggest giant light source has the softest shadows. So if you look at this in the sense of an aperture, the hole in the lens, the bigger the light, the bigger the hole is, the softer you're going to get parts of your image. The blurrier the background's going to be. The smaller the hole is, the more sharper everything is going to be. The only thing you're controlling here is the size of the light source. So the aperture in the lens is controlling the size of the light source going into the camera. Here's a small light source. Look at the shadow on the wall. It's kind of got a hard edge. And here's a larger light source. Look at the shadow. It's almost gone. It's completely soft. So the size of the light source makes a big difference at how soft the light is. Now, obviously, we had to crank up the power of the light in order to have the same light level as we did before with the smaller light source. But look how much softer it is. Now, I know this is common sense to a lot of people, but the point that a lot of people are forgetting here is this huge light source and this small light source have the same diffusion over them. Some people think just putting diffusion over a light source is going to soften the light. So why isn't this making that shadow soft? Because it has diffusion over it. Well, that's why we're having this video today. But before we get to the good stuff, I just want to finish my point. And this is the most important point of all of photography and video and filmmaking and cinematography. And that is, no matter how fancy and how big and how expensive the camera and the lens is, it is useless without light. All the lens does is control the amount of light and how focused the light is going into the sensor, which then splits it into RGB, which then goes to the processor, so you got the white balance. But it can't do any of that. It cannot even capture an image unless there is light out here. And the quality of the light and how much of it is lit, you can't take something that's backlit and make it front lit with a camera and a lens. That's controlled by the lighting. Everything that you see on a camera and through a lens is happening out here. So this is where you should focus, not here. That is the most important thing of all of photography and video and filmmaking and cinematography. Without good light, you have nothing. In fact, your camera and your lens are kind of your last hope. It's your last stop for getting it right before you capture it. Not counting, of course, post-processing and AI and trying to fix it later, shooting in RAW and all that stuff. I'm talking about getting it right in the camera. Your camera and your lens are the last stop. The right thing to do is to get it right before it even hits the camera and the lens. You know how the aperture in your lens controls the size of the light hitting the sensor? Well, the same thing. You control the size of the light hitting the subject. And that's where you have the most control, and this is where you get the most magical results, is when you control the light before it hits the camera and the lens. So let's get back to the fun stuff of controlling lights here. I have a model that's a little bit more flattering than the last one because I already made my point with that. This one represents a more typical model that would be used in photography, video, and filmmaking. We're using a 14-inch open reflector with a bare bulb, and it is 5 feet from the subject, and you're getting a shadow that's like this. It's kind of hard edge, but you see light, medium, and dark shadows. As I mentioned before in the previous video, you got 3 different shadows, and the purpose of a diffusion is to blur that shadow, to soften it here and here. And of course, putting diffusion between the light and the subject softens the shadows so it's nice and soft. Now, as I pointed out in the last video, a lot of people think simply putting diffusion right over the light is going to give you a soft shadow. There you go. Look at that. It's not very soft, is it? But when you take it over here, closer to the subject, look at the shadow difference. So watch what happens as I pull this away from the subject, closer to the light. Notice how much harder that shadow gets. The distance of the diffusion from the light makes a difference. The distance of the diffusion from the subject makes a difference. The distance of the subject from the background makes a difference. So all these things make a difference before the light ever hits the camera or the lens. And you cannot control how soft that shadow is once the light hits the lens. Well, unless it's out of focus. But the point is, all the beauty stuff, the stuff that makes stuff look good, soft shadows and shading and light and all that, happens before the light ever hits the lens or the camera. So this is where the magic happens, not there. All right, one of the questions people asked was, how do you mount this stuff? Well, that's what these are. These are frames that Hollywood uses. Depends on what size you want. A typical size is 4 feet by 4 feet, or 5 feet by 5 feet, like these, or 2 feet by 3 feet, or 18 by 24. And it depends on the size of the light, obviously, and how big this thing is. Here's a smaller one. Now, all of these obviously get attached to a stand with a grip head. Obviously, you need counterweights down below. I highly suggest you use shot bags, not sandbags, but shot bags. They're smaller and they're heavier And these things are great for holding down light stands. Anyway, so obviously it can go horizontal like this or vertical like this. And how do you attach the gel to the frame? Well, there's two popular methods with grips. One is C47s and one is tape. What is a C47, you may ask? This, my friends, is a C47 in the grip world. It's a clothespin. They're real fast and easy to use. And now we have control of the light. It's not a bad thing to put a gel close to the light. Sometimes you want that. You don't want super washed out soft shadows. Sometimes you want some definition in shadows. You just want to soften it a little bit. And it also depends what kind of a gel. Are you using a spun or a frost or a white? It's not uncommon to see a gel 6 inches in front of a light. And it also is good to have some space, just a little bit of space, a few inches, because that way the heat from the light has a place to get out. Anyway, so here we have a gel about 5-6 inches from the light, and here we have it 3 feet from the light. Notice the shadow on the wall, nice and soft. Now the reason to have so many different types of gels and diffusers and fabrics is because there are different things at play, not just how soft the shadow is. For example, one of the factors that's at play is the directionality of the light. What happens when it comes out this side? Does it scatter in all directions, or does it stay kind of directional? Because that's kind of important. Sometimes the light only stays in an area. Sometimes it just spreads out all over the place and just fills the whole room with light, which you don't want to do sometimes. For example, here's a bare 7-inch reflector on a wall. Notice the spread pattern, notice the hot spot. Now when we put an opal frost on here, notice how it smooths out and the edge of the pattern gradates out really nicely. If we use a 3009 light tough frost, it's even smoother. What I want you to notice is the spread pattern and how big the spread is on each one of these. This is a 30-20. This is a 30-32 half grid. This is one of my favorites. This is a 3006 full tough spun. Notice the splotches on the wall. You want that sometimes to simulate, for example, being underneath of a tree or something like that. You don't want even light all the time. And here's the famous Lee 216 full white. Really, really smooth, but of course it eats up more light. Now remember, the bigger the light source, the softer the light, the softer the shadows. And when I say bigger light source, I don't mean the light itself or the reflector. I mean what it's going through. The diffuser, the gel, the frame, or even the window with the curtains or whatever it is that the light is coming through. That becomes your light source. So this is a smaller light source than this. This is a bigger light source. Even though the light that's hitting it behind the light is actually the same size, this becomes the light source, not the actual light. Now you can take a small frame like this and make it a bigger light source by simply bringing it closer to the subject. If you were this subject and you brought this thing really close to your face and it just seems bigger to you because it's closer, that means it's a bigger light source. Now you could have a huge light source like this, and if it was 30 feet back, this could be actually a smaller light source than this, which is closer to the person. So when I say bigger, smaller light source, I mean to the person here. So it's not just a matter of how far away the diffusion is from the light itself, but how far away it is from the person. Now, interestingly enough, even though the actual source of the light, the snoot, is creating a tiny little spot of light, notice the shadow on the wall. Look at that. Look how soft that is. Even though the light hitting this, well, it gets, obviously the further away this gets from the light, the bigger the beam is. But the point is, the actual light coming out of the light bulb is a tiny little spot. And look how soft that shadow is. And when I bring this closer to the light and have it right up to the light like that, notice how hard that shadow is. So even though the physical light is a tiny little spot, you can still get soft light from a tiny little spot of light by what you do with your diffusion and where it is in relation to the light. Even with a hard Fresnel spotlight, you can get soft shadows. So here we have the diffusion right up to the light. Look how hard that shadow is. And we bring it closer here. Notice how the shadow gets nice and soft. Look at that. Really, really nice. All these factors make a difference. What kind of gel you're using, the distance from here to here, from here to here, from here to here. Now, there's nothing wrong with putting a gel right over the light. Just make sure it's a professional gel so it's flame resistant. Just realize, obviously, that the shadows are going to behave differently when you have it right over the light source. And you're going to probably want to use a different gel if you're going to put it right on the light than if you're holding it away from the light. You're going to use a different type of gel because they all work differently, of course, because of the mathematics. Sometimes you just want a little bit of softness and not totally blurred out shadows, and that's a case where you might want to do it like this. I just tape it right to the reflector with gaffer tape. Now again, the bigger the light source, the softer the light, so that's why you have things like this. And for that, you're going to need big rolls like this. The problem with frames like this is they're really unwieldy, like especially if you're working in a small studio or something. These things are huge, they're bulky, they're awkward. I don't like these. They're really annoying to work with, actually. What I like to use is collapsible ones. Now, obviously, you can get ones like this that come as a kit that you can put together. I've made videos about this, but the ones that I like the most are ones that come in a compact pouch like this. This is a 4x4 foot diffuser / reflector. Setup comes with reflectors, diffusion material, and the frame is expandable. Look at this. Bang, ready to go. And this doesn't weigh anything. This is really lightweight. This is super lightweight aluminum. It weighs nothing. It's great for taking on location. And it also has a swivel head so you can lock it into place at an angle, which is really cool. So if the sun is kind of overhead, you can have it at an angle like that. Of course, the bigger the diffuser, the more powerful of a light you're going to need to go through it from the other end, which is why you see Hollywood have these huge giant lights outdoors when running them through frames like this. And speaking of big collapsible frames you can take with you anywhere on location, for those of you who haven't seen it, I made a video how you can get Hollywood glamour lighting outdoors in the middle of nowhere with no lights whatsoever. That's a pretty epic video for those of you who like masterclass style videos for free. To put the link down below. I have all kinds of lighting videos on this channel because lighting is the secret to great photography, video, filmmaking, and cinematography. That's the secret. It's not the camera or the lens. If you have great lighting, you could use almost any camera, even a pocket camera, and get great stuff if you know what you're doing. So I hope you get inspiration from my channel. You really don't need to spend a lot of money. You don't have to worry about the guilt of not having what other YouTubers have with their cinema cameras. Oh, geez. Anyway, so I just hope you get inspired. You can be creative using nothing but tinfoil and foam core and some cheap lights and some diffusion gels and some reflectors, and you don't even need lights. I made videos about how to create great lighting with no lights at all. So I hope you get inspiration from this channel. I want you to have a wonderful, exciting life in the world of photography and cinematography. So I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a good one.